Boardroom Bound, episode 114, Maximizing Effectiveness in a Boardroom and the Private Director Association, with Alan Aldworth.
Being a director really is a continuous learning experience, just as just about any profession requires continuing education, continuous learning. Being a director is no different. If you're not continuously learning, you're not really fulfilling your role as a competent board director.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Alan Aldworth. He is the CEO of PDA, which is the Private Directors Association. This is an organization that does an amazing job educating and preparing people, whether they are prospective board members or current board members, how to best present themselves, to build up all the skill set they need, and to find the opportunities. And even during the pandemic, they have made an amazing pivot. And I'm a card-carrying member, huge believer. I get tons of value of it. And I'm excited to hear from Alan, not only what they're doing today, but how he's planning to build the organization to improve for the future. And this is a tool that everyone is going to want to hear about today. And I imagine many of you will want to become members after this. Let's jump into the show. Alan Aldworth, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I'm really proud to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on today because I am a card-carrying member of the PDA, and by the time we're done today, that acronym will be burned into everybody's brain, and I know that I've received huge value from it, and I'm excited to share that with everybody, but it's not just PDA. We're also talking about all of your vast experience, which is how you got to be leading the PDA. So, but I always get too excited here, but let me back it up for a second before we jump in. Let's start with a little bit of your career story, because first you were a successful executive, then you're a successful board member, and now you're leading an organization that trains people how to be very good board members themselves. So let's start with your executive career. How did that come about?
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. I really started my career in public accounting and then moved on to actually internal audit with Tribune Company, a large media company based in Chicago. Worked my way up through the ranks of Tribune Company and became the CFO of the newspaper publishing division. Eventually moved from there into starting a new division in education and new media. Ended up heading that division. I grew it to $400 million and then sold the division to McGraw Hill, and that was about 2000. At that time, I joined another company called ProQuest, and it was a microfilm company, basically, that's selling microfilm to libraries. We transitioned that to a digital company, took it public, grew it into a large business, and then it was acquired by private equity companies, including Goldman Sachs. So in my career, I've been CFO of a large division of a public company, CFO of a public company, and CEO of a large division of a public company, and CFO of a public company. Along the way, I picked up a lot of board director experience. My first board opportunity came along when I was fairly young in my career. When I was with Tribune, I was overseeing some minority investments in companies that were fast growth software companies that were strategic to the media business that we were in. And usually the champion of an investment would go on the board of the company. And these were generally not just raw startups, but early stage companies. So we might be making a Series A or a Series B investment in the companies. So I started serving on the boards of these companies, and I really didn't know what the heck I was doing as a board director. No one prepared me for that.
Thanks for your honesty there.
I was always interested in continuous learning and really studying, what the heck am I supposed to be doing here as a board director? And that really began my journey with learning how to be the best board director I could possibly be. I eventually went on to serve on public company boards, lots of private boards, even nonprofit boards. So, now 20 or so years later, I've been on 23 boards in total of really all types. And it's been a very interesting journey for me to observe boards, observe other board directors, and really think about what does a good board director do? How does a highly functioning board operate? And that's what got me interested in the Private Directors Association, because the NACD obviously serves public companies very well, but there wasn't a parallel organization for private companies that just focused on private company governance. So I got involved with the Private Directors Association really to learn how to be the best board member I could be, particularly with private companies.
And Alan, let's break it down for our audience just for a second to be really clear, because I think when most people think about a compensated board role, they're usually thinking about a public company board. That just tends to be where our brain goes. And there are exponentially more private company board roles than public company board roles. And so you'd say maybe for that reason alone, that's a good place for someone to think about. But also some people consider it's like a stepping stone. It might be really hard to land your first board seat on a public company board. Maybe better to begin in, say, nonprofit, potentially also sort of private companies, sort of imagine moving up from like the baseball rankings along the way. How do you put all of that into context for people as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alexander. Yes, obviously there are far more private companies than public companies in the United States, and even large private companies. So there are theoretically far more private company board opportunities, and most board roles, whether they're fiduciary roles or advisory roles, do come with compensation. There are some exceptions to that. Particularly startup companies, which is a good way for an aspiring director or a new director to get some experience serving on a board. But generally, even private company boards are compensated positions. And as I said, there are far more opportunities there. And a lot of directors find private company board service more rewarding than public company board service. With public company board service, there are so many legal and regulatory matters that boards have to concern themselves with that there's less time for really digging in and understanding the company and getting involved with, for example, strategic planning, succession planning, and other issues like that that really determine the value, the growth, and the sustainability of the company. So as a private company director, you really feel like you're rolling up your sleeves and helping the company succeed, get better, improve its management team, improve its strategic planning, and become a more sustainable and valuable company.
And this is going to be a gross oversimplification, but I think for many people, they could probably wrap their head around a private company might be a family situation. You might have a third, fourth, fifth generation type company where, just as you talked about, there's succession planning going on down the line. The organization is growing, becoming more professional, moving from having, say, many family members in the senior roles to adding more people who are sort of experts in their field and known for that as authority. And being a board member in that space is very different than, say, I was at JP Morgan before I came here. Hundreds of years of lots of M&A happened between that to build this very professional organization, different culture and style. And that sort of approach might be more of a fit and interest to some people, I think, to the point that you're making, but also brings very different dynamics. So pros and cons to both of those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do serve all types of private companies, and I'll touch on that in a bit. But family-owned companies are unique unto themselves and have their own unique set of issues, whether that's a first-generation family company that's successful and moving on to, whatever follows that, whether that's a second-generation leadership or outside leadership with family ownership or even exiting the company. But that's where having a good board can make all the difference in that successful transition to whatever is next after the first-generation founder leadership. And then as you get on to successive generations, say that, second, third, fourth, or beyond, then the company starts to look more like a public company because you might have, dozens of stakeholders, family members that are shareholders, And so it's important to have a board that stands between the management team and the shareholders to ensure that all of the shareholders are equally represented, but importantly, that the management team is running the company for the benefit of the shareholders and not for themselves. So a good board with qualified, capable board members is critical in a family business to make sure, again, that they are sustainable, that they can make that transition from first generation to whatever follows that second generation leadership or ownership. And incidentally, a lot of successful companies, family companies, fail to make the transition from first to second generation for a variety of reasons, and fail beyond that, moving from second to third and on and on. And most of the reasons that they fail could have been avoided if they had a highly functioning board. So yes, board directorship is critical of family-owned companies, but there are other types of family-owned or other types of private companies that we serve. Private equity companies, for example, ESOP companies. ESOPs are required to have independent board directors. So it's critical that those independent directors are trained and capable. And then private equity backed companies and venture-backed companies and startups all require boards, and it's all the better if they have qualified, trained, professional, independent board members.
And so when we think about that massive universe of different types of private organizations, how did PDA come about and begin serving into this space?
The PDA was formed in 2014 by a group of folks in Chicago who decided that there was a space for an association that really focused on the needs of private company directors. And it really started as a Chicago organization where it was a local thing, and they were getting together on a regular basis to talk about private company governance matters. And then after a few years, some of those members moved to other cities and said, gee, this is a great organization. I'd like to start a chapter in this city. So the Detroit chapter was formed, the Charlotte chapter was formed, and that continued as members would move about. They would start chapters. And in fact, that's how I started the Houston chapter. I had lived in Chicago. I had lived in Detroit. I moved to Houston, and there was no chapter here. So I called up the headquarters and I said, hey, there's no local chapter in Houston. What does it take to get one started? And they said, it takes somebody like you to get one started.
one really good and willing volunteer.
Right. So this was right as COVID was just shutting things down as well. So I thought, well, now's a terrible time to do this, but what the heck, I'll give it a try. And I thought, if I can get 20 people to sign up in Houston by the end of the year, which was last year, I'll consider that a victory and be proud. But lo and behold, we ended up getting more like 200 people in Houston to join the PDA in Houston last year, all during COVID. So the national office recognized that success and asked me to consult with the other chapters to teach them how to accelerate their growth. And then they asked me if I'd be interested in running the whole organization.
Well, I can say that we noticed what you were doing in Boston. I was similarly part of the Boston founding chapter last year, and our goal was to get to 100 by the end of the year. We got to about that. We could never quite keep pace with what you were doing, but PDA has sort of been on the move, right? It's really interesting to see how it's grown and developed and I guess, becoming more sophisticated in its own right. I know you have massive opportunities in front of you that are exciting. You and I were talking before, and there's so many things going on that you want to see grow and develop out of it.
Yeah, that's right, Alexander. The membership doubled last year. It's on pace to double again this year. We're approaching 2,000 members. I think by the end of this year, we'll be approaching, if not at, 4,000 members. So, we've transformed now into a slow growth organization to a hyper growth organization, and experiencing all of the challenges that goes along with that. But everyone in the leadership of the organization, nationally and at the chapters, is very enthusiastic about what's going on at the PDA and working hard to realize all of the potential.
Well, I'd love to hear more about that, especially because I would actually say during COVID as a member, I feel like I get even more value because everything is virtual, which means I can attend all these different events happening across the country at a given time. It really is fascinating how it's really changed what we're doing. But I know PDA University and other amazing things are coming online. So please tell us more about what you're planning and what you've already started actually as well.
Yeah, the webinars were kind of an amazing pivot. The organization had only done live events at the chapter level. That was really what defined the organization's existence. And then when COVID shut everything down, they really amazingly and brilliantly pivoted immediately to webinars. And I've attended many of the webinars, watched many of the recordings, and they're all very good. Some of them are quite excellent, but it's pretty astounding how quickly the PDA pivoted from live events to webinars. And now, in less than a year, we've had over 100 webinars, and the attendance keeps growing. So I think that speaks to the quality of the webinars. So we started out at maybe 25, 30, 40 people at a webinar. Now we're seeing over 200 people attend a webinar, and we've got one scheduled for this Wednesday that already has over 350 people registered from the organization. So when everyone is really zoomed out and tired of webinars, while we're experiencing Zoom fatigue as well, still the quality of the content in our webinars is so good that we're getting great attendance to the webinars. So now we're moving on to the next phase, which is, as you just said, Alexander, the PDA University. So this will be online courses delivered on our learning management system that's connected to our website. It's a seamless part of our website, and we're developing courses that will be delivered via the learning management system. So you'll have webinars, you'll have live events, but you'll also have these online anytime courses that you can access. And we're beginning with a basic director training course. So this will be a course that will take you approximately 12 hours to get through in total, but it will really give you the basics of what a good director needs to know. This would be applicable for an aspiring director, maybe a new director who landed on a board and suddenly says, well, I'm a smart, accomplished person, but I really don't know what the heck a board director is supposed to do.
Right.
And even old timers like me, I'm going to go through the course, and even though I've been on 23 boards over 20 years, I bet I will learn a lot because there's just so much to learn, and it's constantly evolving. So that's sort of basic knowledge of what it means to be a director, and then following that will be courses about specific aspects of being a director. So what you need to know as a director of an ESOP company, what you need to know as a director of a family-owned company, maybe a family-owned company that's in later generations, later stages, what you need to know about ESG, what you need to know about diversity and inclusion. So there's endless opportunities for very focused, relatively short courses that we'll be developing and delivering through the PDA University. It'll also oversee our resources. We have really a vast body of resources that is available to PDA members, including proprietary content, and also we have access to a large business database of 7,500 business periodicals, current editions all the way back to our archives into the 70s for doing research. We actually had a webinar today teaching members how to do research using this database. And again, that's recorded and available to members who want to do research. And we encourage members that are involved in webinars and writing newsletters and participating in the development of courses and mentorship to always, do empirical research on the subject matter that they're covering, so they're not just sort of free-forming everything that they say, that they're actually backing it in facts and can cite empirical research. So those are just some of the benefits that members get from the Private Directors Association, and many new things coming online as the year progresses.
And I guess I would also just sort of bridge back to a little bit you were talking about before about some of the webinars. So there are conversational topics. There are panels of whatever it might be. You gave examples of ESG, what it's like to serve in a private company board. But there's also educational. Some of these have been very clear sessions. And I think these might be some of the most popular. Like, how do you build your LinkedIn profile to be in a board? How do you make your board-ready resume? Things like that, where it's very practical that everyone leaves like, oh, these are very important things for me to know and get myself ready to be prepared for the opportunities that come up. But the other thing I would stress is the opportunities that the organization has been raising. One of the things that's been most impressive to me is over the last, I would say, 6 months, there's been an exponential increase, it feels to me, in the number of sourced board opportunities that PDA is bringing to its members. Just today, I got one that showed up in my inbox, and this is happening at the frequency that it's increasing, which is exciting, not only just to see what they're like, but to actually see a job description for a board. And different companies have different ways of doing it. What are they writing? What are they looking for? How to go about it? I think that helps all the members just to reassess, like, who am I? What do I stand for? How do I put myself forward? Would love to hear more of your thoughts on this.
Yes, it's called the board. It's the Board Directors Opportunities Committee, very large committee that has members from all the chapters, and they reach out to companies, form relationships with the companies, and encourage the companies and search firms to list their board openings on the PDA site so that they get access to the membership. So it's a great benefit to companies and search firms to be able to post an opportunity with such a great group of individuals that are PDA members. And it's also a benefit for members because they get to look at board opportunities that are posted there and apply for those opportunities if their skills match the requirements. So we don't aim to be a board placement service. There really is no such thing as a board placement service because it's all about being board ready. So we really focus on helping individuals be the best board director they can possibly be, whether they're a highly experienced board director or a new director or an aspiring director. But as you said, Alexander, to give the directors an opportunity to see what the job descriptions look like, to actually apply for positions, and learn how to position themselves and develop their own resumes, both the document as well as their experience on being a board ready individual.
And Alan, I'd love to come back to a little bit of the stuff we talked about very early about your dramatic experience in a boardroom. 23 boards in total sounds like an awful lot of experience to be able to draw upon. And for our audience and even also PDA members like myself listening, we're always trying to figure out how do we best position ourselves? How do we get that across who we are and what we stand for to someone on the other side, whether someone's running the nominating governance committee or, for example, I know you're the vice chair of one of your boards. Imagine someone who's saying reaching out to do the networking or actually learning about a role and wanting to apply for it. Give us a sense for someone on the receiving end like yourself who's already on the board. How does someone best come across as a candidate who's someone who should be seriously considered?
Well, if it's a candidate that has little or no board experience, everybody has to get on their first board. If being on a board were a requirement for getting on a board, we'd eventually be an extinct species. So we have to be able to accept aspiring board directors. So an aspiring board director should really understand everything that they need to know, everything they need to do in order to be a capable board director. And that's really a big part of what the PDA is about, is helping individuals on their journey from being an aspiring director to being board ready. Or again, if you're a sitting director or an experienced director, how can you be the best board member that you can possibly be? And it takes a lot of work to be a board director. So part of what we do is help folks understand that it's not an easy thing to do. It's like anything in life that is very worthwhile and very rewarding. It's also difficult. It takes a lot of tenacity, and it's time consuming. But we want to take as much of the guesswork out of that as possible, so that we can sort of present a roadmap to folks. How do you get on your first board? How do you get on your second board? How do you apply for, position yourself, even if you're a highly experienced board director, how do you position yourself to be competitive for those, really, great board opportunities that you're looking to interview for, but it's also going to be a very competitive situation with a lot of experienced board directors.
And Alan, speaking into that point for a little bit, we talked about the way that PDA started was, I'm envisioning a large room in Chicago where people are gathering and not only learning, but connecting with each other and building those relationships. And we know that that is the majority of way that most board seats come about, is through your network. COVID has really changed everything. And in some ways, it's maybe easier to get someone's time for a virtual 15-minute coffee, but it's probably harder to go in depth and sort of even maintain some of the existing relationship we're seeing from the latest Harvard Business Review article that I read. I would love your thoughts on how people should be going about this today, and when the world changes and gets back to the new normal, maybe how we do that, and certainly the ways that PDA is facilitating some of these.
Well, if there's one, if I had to say one way that you maximize your opportunities of getting on boards, it's networking. That's maybe the most important thing. It's not there's no direct easy path. There are probably far more director positions that are filled just by the networking within the PDA than the actual postings. I mean, I'm a good example of that. I'm probably 5 of the boards that I've been on or I'm currently on have all been as a result of my networking within the PDA. None of them were actually posted with the PDA. So, the posting is great, but networking is more important. And then just in terms of how we facilitate that, it's a very collegial organization. So when you join this organization, you'll not only have all of your local chapter members that you will get to know and you'll have events with. Most of the chapters have monthly social events. They're virtual now, of course, but we've managed to find great formats for having virtual networking events every month. So virtual cocktail hours, virtual wine tastings, virtual trivia contests, things like that are a lot of fun. We do breakout rooms, and so you can meet a smaller group, 5 or 6 members in a breakout room. So we've actually leveraged the technology, and most members who've been around for a while say they're actually networking better now that we've all learned how to use virtual tools like Zoom to connect with folks. So the history of the organization had always been a very helpful collegial group, but it was harder to really network outside of your own chapter. Now it's much easier to network not only within your own chapter, but with all the other members nationally. And a good way to do that is to really lean into the organization and get involved, get on a committee. That's where you really get to know, groups of people very intimately. They get to know you, and you also get to display your skills and your thinking skills, your problem-solving skills, and your intellect.
Well, Alan, it's been very impressive for me watching PDA grow from the inside as one of the people helping lead the Boston group. I'm very excited for the organization's growing. I know under your leadership, things are moving at a very fast pace in many exciting directions. And I guess as you look forward to the future, obviously there's many things you've got in play, but the world will hopefully shift again and maybe in more fun ways as the vaccine rollout continues. I mean, what is your vision for the PDA, say, a few years down the line?
I see us, right now we have 19 chapters, and I can see us easily having 40 to 50 chapters. The top 50 markets in the United States are large enough to support a chapter based on the research that we've done and our own direct knowledge of some of the smaller market chapters that we have that have been very successful. So we could easily have 50 chapters. It's not that difficult to start up a new chapter in a new market. I mean, we sort of got the formula down for that. So a continued growth in chapters. We've got a pretty good formula down now for growing membership within each of the chapters. So when you start to do the math on that, you could easily envision this organization growing past 5,000 members, and I don't know if it gets to 10,000, but it certainly would seem to have that potential based on just the number of private companies there are in the United States. And then as we grow, it gives us more resources to reinvest. We're a nonprofit, .org. So our goal is not to make money. Our goal is to invest in quality programming and initiatives that are going to deliver benefits back to the members. So we will invest in the PDA University, continue to make that bigger and better, and programs and resources that we make available to members to help them go beyond their journey, continue on their journey from the very beginning of aspiring to be a director all the way through to being a sitting experienced director that is trying to stay current, because things are changing every day. And as you've observed from the webinars, Alexander, some of them are on just the basics, but many of them are on topics that are current right now. So we help our directors stay current, and being a director really is a continuous learning experience, just as just about any profession requires continuing education, continuous learning. Being a director is no different. If you're not continuously learning, you're not really fulfilling your role as a competent board director.
That's right. And Alan, you were just talking about math a moment ago. I should put out there that my membership renewal came up and there was no hesitation. Like, it's incredible value for money, the opportunity and what people are receiving from it. So thank you for all the great work that you are doing. It's exciting to hear about not only what you're doing successfully today, but what's going to be coming down the pike. And we were delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound.
You're welcome, Alexander. And thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Alan Aldworth. So we basically heard from someone who's been on 23 different boards, from both public to private to nonprofit, about some of his individual experience and the best practices, but then how he's also bringing that approach and perspective to the Private Directors Association. And this is an organization before the pandemic started that was already being very helpful for people that wanted to figure out how to bring their best selves to the boardroom, and has exploded. Its growth and its sophistication has been incredible ever since I've experienced that personally. And as someone who helped found the Boston chapter and had just renewed my own membership within PDA, couldn't recommend them highly enough. And you heard with Alan what an exciting time it is to be learning and growing with them. Now remember, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to all of today's resources. And please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. And thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.